I'm saying, so your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. And you thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Dominicans and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed.
Recently, Stephen A. Smith joined Bill Maher on the Club Random podcast, and sparks immediately flew. Both came out swinging, taking aim at the Democratic Party's obsession with woke politics and the self-inflicted policies that, as they argued, have driven the party into decline. Stephen A. criticized the DNC for putting Kamala Harris in the spotlight, calling it a serious mistake. Meanwhile, Maher, a lifelong liberal, sounded like a man disillusioned by the very movement he once championed. Buckle up, this conversation was nothing short of explosive. Let's get into it.
Because my point at the end of this thing Friday is that I'm pissed at the Democrats because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now. Because you blew the election, I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues.
Which is?
Democracy and the environment. To my two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration.
Okay.
In fact, they're antagonistic to both of them. So I have no champion in Washington. They have the courts, they have the House and the Senate, and you totally left me unguarded.
Ma is furious at the DNC for losing the election and, in his view, sacrificing democracy. I understand his frustration. He's watching his party unravel. But let's be real, his anger feels misplaced. What democracy is he referring to exactly? Trump didn't cling to power after 2016. He stepped aside when his term ended. If Ma is talking about the lawsuits against certain media outlets, that's an entirely different issue. Programs like 60 Minutes practically acted as Kamala Harris's PR team, editing interviews to make her look sharp and composed. So yes, Trump was absolutely justified in fighting back. And as for Colbert and Kimmel, what did Ma expect? These hosts turned their shows into endless Trump-bashing sessions. You can't cry threat to democracy when accountability finally comes knocking on your favorite late-night door.
Here's my issue, generally speaking. We can talk to the economy, immigration, crime in the streets, blah, blah, blah. Here's my ultimate issue. The arrogance of the Democratic Party.
I'm saying the same thing.
Arrogance, I mean, we're saying the same thing in two different ways. The arrogance of the second Democratic Party. So Biden doesn't decide to run for re-election. You grease the skid so he doesn't have to go through a primary. June 27th, he shows up and he embarrasses himself. And it positions naturally for the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, to ultimately ascend and become the Democratic nominee. But the last time we saw her in a primary, she couldn't make it to Iowa. Did you really think that was going to work?
Unlike Bill Maher, Stephen A. Smith isn't crying betrayal. He saw this coming long before it happened. To him, the Democrats' downfall wasn't a surprise. It was a slow-motion train wreck that everyone pretended not to see. Smith argues that Biden should have stepped aside long ago. The red flags were glaring, sinking approval ratings, fading enthusiasm, and a party too scared to face reality. Instead of opening the field and trusting voters to choose a strong contender, the DNC practically crowned Kamala Harris like royalty. No real primary, no debate, no new ideas, just blind loyalty to a candidate who never truly energized the base. Smith's message cut deep. This wasn't betrayal, it was political negligence. The Democrats didn't lose because of bad luck. They lost because they refused to learn from their own mistakes.
Then here's what you did. Did you discuss the economy enough? No. You could have discussed the border because unlike Obama, who was quote unquote the deporter in chiefs, according to the Republicans, because he deported more immigrants than Trump did.
According to not just Republicans, but
the
Democrats. There were Democrats who called him that.
He deported more immigrants than Trump, which means he just didn't talk about it, but he did it.
Stephen A. Smith didn't stop there. He went straight for another glaring hypocrisy in the DNC's so-called fight for immigrants. He reminded everyone that under Barack Obama, deportations reached an all-time high. Obama understood the national security risks tied to unchecked illegal immigration, and he acted on them. Yet, the very same Democrats who praised him back then suddenly lost their minds when ICE under Trump did the exact same thing, enforcing the law. Smith called out how the left went from defending border control to chanting abolish ICE practically overnight, all for political theater. This wasn't about compassion, it was about optics and votes. The hypocrisy, he argued, is staggering. When Obama does it, it's called responsible leadership. When Trump does it, it's labeled cruelty. Smith made it crystal clear. The DNC's stance on immigration has nothing to do with morality or safety. It's about power and pretending to care when the cameras are rolling.
Biden walks into office and day one, you sign an executive order that opens the border, and you let more than 12 million immigrants cross the border illegally, and you don't think that's going to be a problem? You knew that the governors DeSantis and in Florida, Abbott in Texas, and others were going to sit up there and attack sanctuary cities by busing these immigrants to your city since you had no problem with it. You were ill prepared to deal with it, okay? All of this stuff was going on.
Many Democrats will try to spin it differently, but the facts speak louder than their feelings. The so-called compassionate, open border policy of the last administration didn't bring kindness. It brought chaos. By refusing to uphold immigration laws and tearing down border protections, they turned control into collapse. Border towns were overrun, law enforcement was pushed to its limits, and the entire system cracked under the strain of reckless leadership. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional policy dressed up as empathy. And now, President Trump is the one force to clean up the fallout. The border crisis, the overcrowded shelters, the rise in trafficking, all of it stems from leaders more obsessed with political virtue signaling than protecting the nation. Stephen A. Smith didn't dramatize it. He simply exposed the hard truth. Democrats created a crisis they now refuse to admit exists.
And I'm saying, so your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. And you thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Dominicans and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed.
That right there is where the DNC truly lost its way. Somewhere along the line, they stopped listening to the people who put them in power. Instead of hearing real concerns from working Americans, they crafted policies based on what sounded morally superior in Washington circles. They chose ideology over practicality, and that disconnect proved fatal. While Democrats were busy preaching, Trump was paying attention. He understood what mattered most to voters: jobs, border security, safety, and America's global strength. He didn't dismiss those priorities. He built his campaign on them. Love him or hate him, Trump spoke the language of frustration that millions of Americans were already feeling. Meanwhile, the DNC stayed stuck in its echo chamber, celebrating itself while alienating the very voters it needed most. That's not just a political mistake, it's a full-blown, self-inflicted collapse.
You didn't pay attention to that? You're from California. You were a district attorney here. You were a state attorney general here. You were a senator representing here. And you didn't know that the Latinos were going to say, yo, we don't like open borders? You didn't know that?
Yeah,
And so I'm looking at it and I'm saying all of these things are going on. All of these things are going on. And your argument essentially was, you didn't say it, but this is essentially your argument. It's her turn. It's her turn.
Democrats didn't run on ideas, they ran on entitlement. Instead of inspiring voters with real solutions or a forward-looking vision, their message boiled down to one thing. It's Kamala Harris's turn. That's not how leadership works, that's how political dynasties crumble. Voters weren't offered a clear economic agenda, a serious border plan, or even a spark of innovation. And the moment anyone questioned her readiness, the conversation was shut down with accusations of sexism or bias. The campaign became less about earning trust and more about enforcing loyalty. But Americans are tired of that act. They want results, not moral lectures. Yet the DNC refused to see it, treating Kamala's nomination like a royal ceremony instead of a democratic race. In the end, that arrogance blew up in their face. You can't demand votes through guilt, you win them through merit. And the Democrats forgot that fundamental rule.
No, the Republicans don't play that. They say, hell with all of that, whose turn it is. We want him. Who do the Democrats want? If you ask them today, they still don't know. They said Kamala because it was too late to say anybody else. But you didn't know who they would say if there was a primary.
And also because the Democratic Party is ideologically captured by identity politics.
I'm totally with you 1,000%. Listen, I'm a big Bill, just so you know, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a social liberal. Live and let live, bro.
And a freak in the sheets.
You know what I'm saying?
If you're 50,
I do try.
Give us a call.
I do try, no doubt. But here's the deal, man. Listen, I'm a social liberal. And what I mean by that is gay rights, absolutely. Transgender rights and all this stuff. I got no issues with you. I don't want anybody. I'm a black man. I don't want anybody's civil rights violated. I don't want anybody being persecuted in the streets of America. I don't want you being mistreated. I don't want you being denied the same rights that I have. That's fine. But the Democrats took it too far.
Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith nailed that the Democratic Party has trapped itself in the politics of identity. What started as a fight for fairness has turned into a contest of labels. Of course, America still struggles with real inequality, but the left's response hasn't been empowerment, it's been performance. Instead of building a culture of excellence, they've tried to engineer equality by lowering the bar. Merit was traded for optics, and results were replaced by representation charts. When you start scrapping academic standards or job qualifications just to hit a diversity target, you don't fix injustice, you create mediocrity. This country was built on hard work and ability, not participation trophies. Yet Democrats keep confusing symbolism for substance. And as Maher and Stephen pointed out, that obsession with how things look instead of how they work has done real damage, especially to the very communities they claim to champion. Equality doesn't come from erasing merit. It comes from giving everyone the chance to rise to it.
It wasn't just about their rights. You wanted folks to like and embrace and accept everything. Excuse me. There are some people that, guess what? They might watch prostitution, but they ain't with them. Strippers, but they ain't messing. It's all right. Do you? But I don't want it in my face. You got people that think like that, and knowing that that's the reality, and knowing that that doesn't even make up 1% of the population, you are caught on tape, if you're Kamala Harris, saying, quote, I'm for transgender operations for prisoners. You didn't think Trump was going to use that?
And that's where the far left completely loses the plot. Their ideas sound compassionate until you actually look beneath the surface, then the logic falls apart. A stable society can't survive without moral boundaries, shared values, and a sense of responsibility. But the far left keeps testing those limits, confusing radicalism for progress. Look at the growing movement to let minors make irreversible gender changes. That's not compassion, that's recklessness. Children are still figuring out who they are. Guiding them through that confusion is one thing, but pushing them toward life-altering medical decisions is another. There's a fine line between empathy and enabling chaos, and the far left keeps crossing it. As Maher and Stephen A. Smith both argued, when ideology replaces common sense, the entire society suffers. You can't build a sane, functioning nation by denying biological reality and calling it justice. Some boundaries exist for a reason, ignore them, and everything starts to collapse.
I'm just saying, like, this is why I say I voted for Kamala Harris, but I can't deny that strictly from a campaign perspective, Bill, he was the better candidate because he played to his constituents.
In their defense, they had a meeting and they decided that free for murderers was a good slogan.
Okay. And where did that get them? Because in the end, when you're trying to pay your bills,
but here's the
and you got peace in the streets that you're worried about, you're not going for that.
Here's the silver lining.
You're trying to win.
I think the election showed we're much less racially tribal than we thought we were. I mean, Trump is a strange guy to bring together all these different coalitions, but he like won Latino men.
13%. They said it was a 13% jump.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever it was.
And a 5% jump in the black vote, and even more of that amongst black men.
Donald Trump changed the game because he spoke to the real concerns of ordinary Americans. His message wasn't dressed up in political buzzwords or empty virtue, signaling it was straightforward, practical, and rooted in everyday reality. He reached the working class, suburban families, and especially middle America, the people who felt forgotten by Washington elites. Most citizens aren't chasing political perfection. They just want steady jobs, safe neighborhoods, and secure borders. Trump understood that, and for millions, he delivered exactly what he promised. The media mocked his blunt style, but voters measured him by results: jobs returning, crime falling, and America standing firm on the global stage. Meanwhile, the left kept doubling down on policies that made no sense to regular people: open borders, soft on crime laws, reckless spending. Americans weren't buying the slogans anymore. They wanted stability, not speeches. Trump didn't just win votes, he reignited a voice that had been ignored for decades. Maher and Stephen A. Smith only said out loud what millions already felt. The Democratic Party has lost its connection to reality. They've traded merit for identity, leadership for ideology, and reason for political theater. Trump didn't crush the Democrats, they sabotaged themselves. Until they stop preaching and start listening, they'll keep alienating the very voters they claim to represent. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more Straight Talk ahead. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.